Question number 10. What are some of the prophetic signs of Revelation that we are in the final countdown? Now, in the Bible, it tells us that Jesus was talking with his disciples one day. They were visiting the temple, and he shocked them with a statement saying there would not be left one stone upon another. And they wanted to know. They thought the destruction of the Jewish temple would be the end of the world. And so they said, Lord, they came to him. And he said to them, there'll not be left one stone upon another. And this is Matthew 24, verse 2. And they said in verse 3, tell us, when shall these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the world? Then Jesus gives a series of signs. For instance, he says, one of the first things that Jesus said, speaking of signs of the end and the second coming, don't miss this. Christ said, beware of false Christs and false prophets. First thing he said. Of all the other signs, you know what that tells me? Jesus was saying there's going to be a lot of counterfeits out there. There'll be a lot of misinterpretations. I want to ask you, when Jesus came the first time, the majority of his people that had the Bible, did they understand who he was and were they ready? Could that happen again? So just because you've got a best-selling book talking about prophecy, does that mean it's the truth? Or could that be a sign? Matter of fact, the way I read my Bible, Jesus says, narrow is the way that leads to life, and few there be that find it. So don't just flow with the popular trends. Beware of false prophecies and false Christs. And we'll say more about that. Another sign Jesus gave for the last days, he said there would be an intensity of wars and rumors of wars. Do we have war in the world today? We're engaged in what's being called war right now. Are there rumors of war? Just this week, talks about problems with Syria and Iran and North Korea. And it's especially intense when you consider that they're now worried about some nuclear weapons that seem to have disappeared. I understand that since the collapse of the Soviet Union, that there are, one report said 200 nuclear warheads that are missing. Well, that ought to be a real concern. Amen? What if that should happen to fall into the hands of some rogue nation? Right? These missing warheads. I mean, some of these countries and these people are not afraid to strap themselves with explosives and blow themselves up. What if a group of them gets a hold of a nuclear device? And that's why we are seeing this increase of security everywhere I go in the world now, because people are afraid. We also have the chemical agents and the nerve agents and biological warfare. In the last century, I know we're in a new century now, but I mean in the last 100 years, 2 world wars, and the weapons are on a scale that they never have been again. Furthermore, it's possible that if Jesus doesn't come soon, man will self-destruct. Do we now have the capacity to destroy ourselves? Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24, verse 22, unless those days were shortened, speaking of his second coming, no flesh. That doesn't just mean people. Flesh means living organisms, creatures. No flesh would survive. We're getting to that point where if Jesus doesn't come soon, man will self-destruct. In that same theme, there's pollution. Are you aware there's a prophecy in the Bible that talks about those that destroy the earth? Revelation chapter 11, verse 18. And it says that you should destroy those who destroy the earth. God made man, put him in a garden, said dress it and keep it. We are stewards of this planet. And I'm not a hyper-environmentalist, but I think we should care about the planet, amen? And take care of things. Does man now have the capacity to destroy the earth? Somebody sent me this picture of a swan nesting, surrounded by filth in a polluted river. And I thought, it's a picture of, the purity that God created things with and what we've done to it. And not only that, but just it's happening in the water, in the air, in the food, in the soil. We are polluting the environment. Could man pollute the environment 100 years ago? Not like today. I mean, it doesn't matter how many orange peels you've got or coconut shells, you're not going to pollute the environment. Now we've got the ability to really destroy things. Another sign Jesus gave of the last days, an acceleration of natural disasters. Do we see that happening? I thought it was something when this tsunami struck. Karen and I never forget. You all remember where you were? We were driving across Nevada. We were listening to the news, and we heard about it. And they first began to announce as many as 10 or 15,000. Well, I've been on some of those beaches where it hit. I was in India on the beach in Madras. And I said, no way. I said, it's going to be a lot more than that, dear. And the number, of course, we all know, continued to climb. And I don't know, I've heard everything from 160,000 to 200,000 people. And the news reporters were saying this disaster of apocalyptic proportions. Is this the wrath of God? News reporters, secular reporters were saying this disaster of biblical proportions. Even the unbelievers saw this as almost a harbinger, a sign of what is coming. Should get our attention. You know, there's a prophecy. In Luke chapter 21, Jesus is talking about the signs of the end, just like in Matthew 24. He makes this additional statement, and there will be signs in the sun and the moon and in the stars and on the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. Have we seen that? Could this be a sign? And then you read on, Luke 21, verse 26, men's hearts failing them for fear, and the expectation of those things that are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven will be shaken. You know, you go back a few years ago, and people didn't understand that terrorism really was a war technique. Now we hear all about terrorism. What is terrorism? What does it mean? It is a war of using fear as a weapon. Men's hearts failing for fear, the sea and the waves roaring. Almost sounds like the headlines, doesn't it? I believe that we're living in the last days. Jesus also talked about the acceleration of earthquakes. He says there'll be earthquakes in diverse places. And of course, the tsunami was connected with a 9.0 earthquake on the Richter scale. Evidently, there's been an increase in earthquakes. And I've got a graph here you're going to put up. I don't know how well you'll be able to read this, but this comes from the U.S. Geological Survey. See the acceleration from 1900 to 2000. And then if you go beyond that, in 1997, there were only 3 notable quakes. 1998, 10. 1999, 13. 2000, dropped down to 6. 2001, 7. 2002, 12. 2003, 39. 2004, 39. 2005, year to date, and this is off because I got this a few days ago. We had 6, and based on that calendar, if they continued at the same rate, we could be over 100 this year. You know, that would lead me to believe that things are accelerating. Jesus is trying to get our attention. Killer weather. You know, I thought it was interesting, not only with the tsunami, but then there was a series. I used to live in Florida, and I remember when Hurricane Betsy came through. But there was a wave of hurricanes and earthquakes in other parts of the world. I mean, sometimes our attention was distracted. And then the fires, and they actually had a number of newscasters one night. I taped it, and then I realized I couldn't show it to you because of copyright things. I wanted to show you several news stations. I'm talking about MSNBC and CNN, a number of them. They all had special reports. Is this the end of the world? What does this weather mean? Is this the wrath of God? Is it a sign? Any of you remember seeing some of those? These news reporters were wondering, what does it mean? Because it wasn't just the tsunami, just back to back. It seemed like God was trying to get our attention. They're asking that question.